The freeway here is Interstate 5 in California's San Joaquin County, and this is the crossing over the San Joaquin River. This is a vital link in the Golden State's transportation network. It's a major crossing on the state's longest highway. But as I pan to the right, two more bridges come into view, and they evidence the long history of the importance of this place to California transportation. This is Mossdale Crossing.
So welcome to This Old Road. Today I am at a place called Mossdale Crossing, and this bridge represented US 48 here in San Joaquin County, California.
Within a distance of only about 400 yards, there are 6 bridges spanning the San Joaquin River here. 4 of them carry automobile traffic, 1 is reserved for pedestrians and bicycles, and the final one is a railroad bridge. 3 of the bridges here are at least 75 years old, and one of those soon will mark a century of service. The oldest bridge among these is this one, a 300-foot-long crossing and its approaches, which opened on August 29, 1927 with 2 main sections, a Warren Truss Bridge combined with a bascule lift bridge. This bridge wasn't the first bridge here, but it's the oldest one surviving. Previous to this, there was a crossing built of timbers, which forded the San Joaquin River at this point. After traversing the river, the road from that era then turned parallel to the river and ducked under the railway trestle here, and then subsequently turned again to follow the Southern Pacific Railroad towards Stockton. California didn't have any numbered highways at the time, but the legislature had designated several important corridors in the state's nascent road network, and the state government was actively developing and improving those corridors. The road pictured here was part of what was known as Legislative Route Number 5, and this plan shown here was put together by the Division of Highways to improve Mossdale Crossing because it was the main route between the Bay Area and the San Joaquin Valley. It's strange to imagine that in the 1920s, even the concept of aerial photography was nascent. The article in California Highways from which I sourced this image mentioned that they had contracted with an aviator to take this photo. The project to improve the route included 2 major elements: a new crossing over the San Joaquin River, as seen here, along with a modern underpass beneath the Southern Pacific Railroad, seen here. The project was put out to bids in 1925. All of this was underway even before the U.S. highway system was born. But speaking of the U.S. highway system, at the same time that all of this improvement was happening, the Federal Bureau of Public Roads released its final map for a new system of nationwide numbered routes in November of 1926. That new plan assigned US 48 as the number for a route which ran between San Jose and Stockton, and that new route would cross the San Joaquin River here at Mossdale. The committee's draft plans had considered assigning 42 as the number for this route, but in the end, US 48 had won out. Now, you may never have heard of US 48, at least not in the context of California roads, but there really was a US 48 in California, and it crossed the river on the brand new bridge here at Mossdale. US 48's time was rather short-lived, however. In 1931, less than 5 years after having been established, US 48 was retired as a route number.
There's no evidence that US 42 was ever signed here in California. In fact, my best research indicates that California didn't sign any US highways at all until at least 1928. So US 42 was something that existed only on paper, but US 48 was definitely a thing from the time it was created in 1926 until the early 1930s. After that, US 50 instead replaced it.
In lieu of Route 48, the powers that be decided to extend US 50. Now, in the original plan from 1926, US 50 had a terminus at Sacramento, but the highway officials wanted to extend US 50 over the route of US 48 so that it could become a true coast-to-coast highway. The die was cast and US 48 became the first US highway to be deleted, although it certainly wouldn't be the last. In 1931, the signs were changed, and from then on, it was US 50 which was routed over Mossdale Crossing. Because of the number of bridges here, it's very difficult for me to get good shots of that old road bridge. In this view, from the northern side of the river, you can see the bascule counterweight used to lift the bridge for maritime traffic. There's a metal deck which provides a 24-foot width for the traffic lanes. The sound of vehicles passing over the metal grates makes for a distinctive sound. One thing which could not be accommodated in that 24-foot width is room for pedestrian traffic, and that shortcoming explains why in recent years a bridge for non-motorized traffic was constructed alongside the old bridge. But again, while the pedestrian bridge certainly makes it much safer to cross the river on foot, it really complicates attempts to photograph that old bridge.
It's a little difficult to see from the pedestrian section here, but the bridge is in two pieces. There's the Warren Truss Bridge here, and then there's also a lift section, which you can see here. That's the one when the cars drive over it, you hear the metal. As they're driving over the metal part, that's the lift section of the bridge.
North of that bridge, that railroad subway, that same one which had been built as a part of the bridge project in 1927, is still in use. Between the bridge and the railway underpass, there are still traces of a former junction for State Route 120. It's that road which diverges off to the right as you head north. For a brief time, that diverging road was also US 99W, remnant of a short-lived split in Highway 99 which passed through French Camp. Today there's a bicycle path on that old Highway 120 right-of-way. It ducks under all of the freeway infrastructure from Interstate 5 and emerges on the other side about 3/4 of a mile away at a stub of Yosemite Avenue in Manteca. By the early 1940s, traffic on US 50 was burgeoning and the state engineers began making plans to widen the highway to 4 lanes. Proposals for a new bridge here were included in the state's optimistic post-war plan, which was approved in late 1943, even while the war was still underway. The war ended in 1945, and then, after further enduring a delay caused by a nationwide post-war steel shortage, a second span for Mossdale was put to bid in early 1947. In 1950, that second span opened. It was nearly 600 feet in length, with a road deck 27 feet wide. The new bridge was dedicated to one-way traffic, as it carried the eastbound lanes of US 50, while the older span, that one from 1927, was then converted to be dedicated to westbound traffic.
It's really difficult to get a good view of that second bridge, being that it's sandwiched in between the old bridge and the Interstate 5 bridges, and the pedestrian access is on the near side of the old bridge. So it's difficult for me to get in there and get some good shots of it.
That bridge, being sandwiched between the 1927 bridge and the later Interstate 5 freeway, is even more difficult to photograph. Here's some footage that I shot through my bug-stained windshield as I drove across it. That's the way things stood for 2 decades. This map from 1952 shows the configuration. You can see the twin spans of the Mossdale crossing. The older span on the left carried westbound traffic, headed for the Bay Area on US 50, while the newly completed span handled the eastbound traffic. Just after crossing the San Joaquin River, the 4-lane highway constricted down to a 2-lane road so that it could squeeze through that railroad underpass, which was already 25 years old by this point. The map also shows the junction for State Route 120, headed toward Manteca. Nothing changed here until Interstate 5 came along. That new freeway crossing over the river was built on a modern concrete box girder structure, but the state made an interesting design choice regarding the older bridges. The newer of the two bridges, that one which was built after World War II, was incorporated into the new freeway's interchange with State Route 120. It became the ramp from Highway 120 to southbound Interstate 5. The really interesting thing about this design choice is that that bridge remained as a one-way facility, but in the new design, traffic crossed the bridge in the opposite direction than from the way it had been originally designed. What had been eastbound US 50, carrying vehicles headed toward Stockton, now became the southbound entrance to Interstate 5, with traffic headed away from Stockton. At the time that the Interstate 5 interchange opened, that oldest bridge, that one from 1927, was returned to local use and restored to two-way traffic. Today, it is Manthey Road, and it provides access to the county park here. Before I end, there's one more bridge to look at, and it's the Railroad Bridge. This structure is a lift bridge, and it was constructed in the 1940s. The railroad bridge is nearly 600 feet long and is 26 feet wide, enough for 2 tracks. Its distinctive lift towers can be seen from quite a distance in the area.
So this is the railway bridge here. I believe this was the 3rd bridge that was on this site. I think this one was constructed in 1942. It's a lift bridge. The first bridge here was completed in 1869. And there are those who say that this was actually the point where the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, because even after the Golden Spike was driven in Utah, it still was not possible to go all the way to the West Coast on a train. The passengers had to debark either in Sacramento or here in the Delta and then take a steamer down. But when this bridge was completed in September of 1869, then you could take a train all the way across. It's really apparent that there were 2 tracks here, and at some point they removed one of them. The bridge is still wide enough for 2 tracks, so I'm not sure what the reason would have been. Maybe tax reasons. Railroads had to pay property taxes on every mile of track, so if it wasn't being utilized, perhaps that was the reason that they removed it.
I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up so that YouTube will share it with other people as well. And if you enjoy the content on this old road, I'd be honored to have you as a subscriber.